Hemos visto muchos pronombres. Para repasar, tenemos, sí, esta información está en la página 208. Gracias. Tenemos, por ejemplo, en el verbo vestirse, ¿no? Pronombres reflexivos, ¿no? Y tenemos otros pronombres. Entonces, este semestre hemos visto me, te y nos, pronombres reflexivos, pronombres de complemento indirecto y también de pronombres de complemento directo. These pronouns can overlap as lots of different types of pronouns. Sin embargo, también hemos visto se, reflexivo, pero también lo, la, los y las de complemento directo. Y este semestre hemos tenido le y les. Una cantidad enorme de pronombres, muchos pronombres este semestre. Y hoy en la clase de español vamos a usar todos juntos, y ya van a ver cómo. Pero para reciclar el concepto básico de los pronombres, tengo una pregunta. ¿Cómo se dice te quiero in inglés? This is a good one to know. Te quiero. I love you. And quiero does mean I want. It does mean that. And you could use it in that context. Generally speaking, te quiero means I love, quiero, you. Te quiero. In English, you comes at the end. But in Spanish, you comes before the verb. We know pronouns come before the verbs. Like, Pablo se vistió con ropa formal la semana pasada. Or Juanita se vistió con ropa formal. Se vistió. Usually our pronouns come before our verbs in Spanish, even though in English, I love is the subject and the verb, and you come at the end. So word order in Spanish is very different, especially with pronouns in Spanish to English. When I was learning about pronouns, I would reflect on te quiero, because I knew what that meant very clearly in Spanish, to help me learn other pronouns and remember word order in Spanish. But before we even talk about, well, actually, we are going to go through word order in English first, like we did before when we were learning pronouns, by throwing around the ball and paying attention to the subject, the verb, the object, and the indirect object. In Spanish, just like English, when we throw the ball to each other, we use direct objects with indirect objects all the time. And we say, like, I gave my professor my homework assignment. That's using a direct and an indirect object. Or, you know, I fed my dog, you know, or I gave my dog a treat the other day. That's a direct object and an indirect object. But sometimes we replace our direct objects, like the ball, with words like it, and we replace our indirect objects with pronouns, like to her or to him. And today we're going to talk about replacing our direct and our indirect objects with pronouns. And as you can see, when we talk about te quiero in Spanish, when we use pronouns in Spanish and word order varies and doesn't function like English, it can get really confusing. So it's really important to apply those strategies, those steps, that order of operations, if you will, on the supersite or on the test to try to figure out what's going on. Who's doing what to what? Who's giving what to whom in these sentences? Okay, so to review what we just did, we threw around the ball. Profesita me tiró la pelota. What's this saying? Who's the subject here? Or what's the verb? Let's start with the verb. Tiró is our verb, which is easy to identify. And when we first find the verb, our subject was who? And this profesita. And so the direct object again, just to reiterate, the ball, la pelota, that's our direct object. Are we using a pronoun here, or is it just the direct object that's being used here? Is la pelota a pronoun? No, but today we're going to talk about if it was, how would we use it? And then what's our indirect object? Me. Is that a pronoun? Me is a pronoun, an indirect object pronoun. IOP, not Isle of Palms, indirect object pronoun. Today we're going to talk about replacing la pelota, she threw it to me. We're going to learn how to say that in Spanish, replacing la pelota with la, and then we have to change our word order. And when we change our word order and we start using pronouns, we really want to rely on what we've already reviewed about decoding complex sentences, aka sentences in Spanish that don't follow the same word order as sentences in English, particularly with pronouns, because in English our pronoun doesn't come before the verb, it usually comes after. We always want to start with the verb. Why do you think that is? Do you remember this? Step 1, find the verb from previously this semester when we were talking about pronouns. We've already taken notes on this. Why do you recall finding the verb is probably the best thing to start with? Octavio?
It tells you the subject.
It tells you who the subject is. So it's really, really important. Once you know who the subject is, then we can figure out who the indirect object is. It's much clearer. But it's kind of tricky here. In this particular sentence, there's still a ball being thrown. But since our verb is tira, we know that that is a singular or plural verb. Is tira singular or plural? It's singular. We know only one person could be the subject, but how do you know Carlitos is the subject and not su papa? How do you know who's throwing the ball to whom? It's hard to tell because papa is also singular. So the dad could be throwing it to Carlitos, or Carlitos could be throwing it to his dad. So do you remember how to distinguish which one is an object? When a person is an object,
What is the person?
the personal excelente. Remember that little personal, like a Catalina le gustó Mexico. And we have to use before Catalina because we're using le gustó. Or like, yo quiero mucho a mis hijos. I love my children so much. A mis hijos. They're the recipient of my love. So a little step that could easily be overlooked is finding that personal that Octavio remember, the personal. This is like muy importante because why again? What does this tell us about the dad? This tells us that the dad is what? He is the indirect object. He is getting the ball. He's not the subject. This confirms that Carlitos is throwing the ball to his dad. And after we find the person, then it's very easy to find the indirect object. After you see that you're like, oh, su papa, he's the one catching the ball. He's the one Carlitos is throwing the ball to. So step 4, find the indirect object. But you really can't find that until you identify that personal After that, then it's easier to figure out what the indirect object pronoun is. What's the indirect object pronoun here? What pronoun do we have in this sentence? Le. Le is our indirect object pronoun. That's our indirect object pronoun. Just like me, profesita me tiró la pelota. Me is an indirect object pronoun, same with te. And we know le is an indirect object pronoun. It's singular, it's third person, so this is something that's different in Spanish than it is in English. In English, pronouns take the place of nouns. They replace them. In Spanish, a pronoun can be used in the same sentence with the noun it's referring to. Like, a Catalina le gustó Mexico. Or, profeseta le tiró la pelota a Juliana. Le is just telling the listener or the reader that there's a recipient involved. We may not know who till later on in the sentence, but it's helpful with verbs like dar and escribir and mandar, things like that. After we find the indirect object, the last thing we look for is the direct object. For me, that's what we save for last. That's just how my native English-speaking brain operates. We save it for last because in my opinion, as a non-native Spanish speaker, it's the least obvious. So I rule out everything, and then I'm like, that must be the direct object. That's all I have left, unless I have a prepositional phrase or something like también, tampoco, or ayer. Pelota is our direct object. It was our direct object. That's the ball we were throwing around in class. If I'm giving you my water bottle is the direct object. It's usually a thing when we have indirect objects. And pelota comes where in relationship to the verb? It comes after the verb. That's important to note also. Sometimes we overlook what the direct object is, or we might become confused, but it's important to note that it's coming after. Después del verbo. After our verb. Just so you can further clarify, here's my verb. Verbs are so easy to recognize in Spanish. Even if it's a verb like puedo tirarte la pelota, te puedo darte un abrazo, or something like that. Even if we have like voy a tirar, a conjugated verb with an infinitive, that direct object, noun, is going to come after our verb. So just to review, here are our direct object pronouns. These are the direct object. You don't have to write these down next yet. You definitely want to write down me, te, and nos on your chart. First person singular, me. What does me even mean in English? It's actually spelled this exact way in English. Me means what? Me. It doesn't mean I. That would be yo. Yo hablo español, I speak Spanish. But if you speak to me in Spanish, tú me hablas español. Me means me. Te means who's you. Te quiero. I love you. Te quiero. Nos means what? Us. It actually means us. Remember on our test, a lot of people got this wrong. It was profeseta, and it was sad that you got it wrong because I was like, they don't know I love them. Profeseta nos quiere. Do you remember that one from the test? It's very obscure. She loves us. Nos is us. Us has 2 letters, US. Nos has 3 letters, and the last one is also S. So try to remember it like that. Nos means us. And then our direct object pronouns are lo, la, los, or las. And those are easy to use. If we wanted to replace la pelota with a direct object pronoun, which one would we use for la pelota? La. Because why? La pelota is what? It's singular and feminine. Salud. Direct object pronouns have gender in third person. Lo versus la. Masculine versus feminine. So when we rewrite our sentence, we want to say it instead of la pelota. When we rewrite it, where do pronouns typically come in relationship to the verb? Tira is our verb, and our pronouns usually come where? Before, like Pablo se vistió con ropa formal. Or Beja no se durmió en clase la semana pasada. Reflexive pronouns, they come before the verbs. Me levanto, se despierta, things like that. Our pronoun still comes before our verb. But now we have 2 pronouns. Le is referring to whom? Who's le referring to again? Su papa. So now we're not saying his dad. We're saying to him. Carlitos throws it to him is what we're saying here. And we have le and la. La translates as it. But you can't lay low in Spanish. That's a little rule to help you remember. You can't lay low. You can't have lay or lace plus lo, la, los, or las. So this is where it gets a little tricky, okay? So listen carefully because this is muy importante. If you have lay or lace, and you want to write your indirect object before your direct object pronoun, so you'll always have me, te, lay or lace or nos before lo, la, los, or las on your answers on the super site. But if you have any L combination, lay or lace with lo, la, los, or las, you remember you can't lay low, and you're going to replace lay or lace with say. It doesn't apply to may, it doesn't apply to tay, it doesn't apply to nose, because there's not that phonetic conflict with those L's. So a lay or lace gets replaced with say. Say is not an indirect object pronoun or a direct object pronoun. It's a reflexive pronoun. But when we have this really unusual phonetic conflict with a lay or lace next to lo, la, los, and las, we change our lay or lace to say. That's a final little rule that only applies sometimes. Does that make sense? Only with lay and lace next to lo, la, los, or las. So, let's just reiterate the meaning of all of this. What in the world is going on? In Spanish, you will hear this. This is when we, and I'm definitely including myself, when I was learning Spanish, when you hear se la tira in Spanish, you're like, what just happened? What is going on? Se la tira? What does that even mean? Se la tira. Se lo di. You'll hear these things in Spanish and you're like, I don't know what you just said. What is this really saying? Because we got lots of pronouns going on here. He throws it to him. That's what we're saying here in Spanish. This is when Spanish gets like muy loco to non-native Spanish speakers, especially native English speakers, because it doesn't work anything like this. He throws is at the beginning of the sentence. We don't even have our subject indicated here. Why? Do you have to write the subject with a verb in Spanish? No, it's implied. And a lot of times after the subject has been revealed, it's not necessary to repeat the subject because it's obvious. The verb tells us who the subject is. That's why it's important to start with that verb. If the verb was tiro, what if I change the verb to tiro? Now what does it mean? Not he throws, but I throw the ball or it to him. So we really want to hang on that verb. If somebody's speaking Spanish to you and they say use pronouns and they're like, se lo di, or whatever the case may be, se lo mandé, you're going to listen to those verbs, di, mandé, tiré, or whatever. Hang on to that verb because at least you can figure out who the subject is. And then after that, everything can make a little more sense due to context. Okay, so then we have our indirect object pronouns. Again, me, te, nos. We recycle those as all forms of pronouns, which is really nice, but our indirects are lay or lace. So we're still going to use me, te, and nos, but we've got lo, la, los, and las, and lay and lace. So all the pronouns that you need to carry with you from this point on are these indirect object pronouns. Direct object pronouns and, reflexive pronouns. So we've got lay and lace, lo, la, los, and las, but when these are combined together, we have to change our lay or lace to say. Sorry, it's not very good writing. It's hard to write on tablets, I feel like, with stylus, but you're going to replace our, let me erase it, fix it a little bit to make it clear. You got to replace your lay and lace with say, okay? That's like muy importante. Okay, so on the supersite, we're going to pull up a supersite activity in which you have to rewrite your sentences with double object pronouns. And I'm going to tell you right now, the best way to do this, honestly, on the supersite, is first start with your verbs and your subjects, okay? Go through every single answer, and if you have your electronic device and you can do this with us, you should. We're going to go through like number 1 and write the subject and the verb. Then number 2, subject and verb. We're not even going to start doing the pronouns in the final steps of this process until the very end, okay? And I want you to follow that advice carefully because you'll see if it's the test, if it's the supersite, wherever you do it, you want to follow that word order.